Hey guys, tonight we drift somewhere quieter, slower, stranger, into the quiet sands of time before the drama. You're in an ancient land where temples haven't crumbled yet, and myths are just rumors waiting to overreact. The stars are thick and sleepy above you, and you're about to meet someone whose hair, believe it or not, used to be positively glorious. You glide toward a stone courtyard wrapped in ivy. The breeze is warm, scented with crushed thyme and dust. Moonlight catches on silver puddles and smooth tiles, and somewhere in the distance, a lazy cicada insists on practicing for an audience of absolutely no one. And there she is, Medusa. Not a monster, not yet. No hissing snakes, no stony stare. Just a girl with really great hair. We're talking shampoo commercial level. Rich, dark, cascading curls that bounce with every graceful turn of her head. Locals whisper it's because she rinses with olive oil and rose water. Others say it's just genetics. You, of course, have snuck in with the breeze that are crouching behind a pillar, trying not to sneeze into the scent of sandalwood and roasted dates. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time below. Curious night owls unite. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trail behind Medusa as she walks barefoot through the gardens of a temple built to honor Athena. Her footsteps are soft, silent, like someone trained in polite rebellion. She's not divine, she's mortal, but her grace hints at something otherworldly, like she knows Olympus is watching and she's just barely choosing not to wave. People forget this version of her. They jump straight to the snakes, to the Gorgon label. But right now, she's just the favorite of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and honestly, kind of a temple teacher's pet. Medusa arranges scrolls alphabetically. She dusts the statues twice a day. She volunteers to stay late when the owl sacrifices run long. You're watching her adjust a ceremonial robe that's way too long for her frame, muttering something about toga designers never accounting for average height. There's a small mirror tucked under her sash. She sneaks glances at herself when no one's looking, making sure every curl is in place. It's charming, it's vain, it's human. Historians still argue whether Medusa's beauty was exaggerated by ancient poets, or if she really did have that kind of celestial jawline. You, hovering like the world's sleepiest time traveler, decide it doesn't matter. What matters is that she feels beautiful, that she moves like someone who's been told she's meant for more, and half believes it. Medusa passes a priest who gives her a suspicious side-eye. He's clearly not a fan. You don't blame him. Medusa's the kind of temple helper who makes everyone else look lazy just by existing. You float after her into the inner sanctum. Here, the air gets cooler, and you can smell incense, old marble, and that odd sacred mildew scent every ancient temple has. The walls are covered in carved eyes, symbols of wisdom and watchfulness. Statues of Athena loom over everything, eyes carved to always follow you, even though you suspect they judge no one harder than Medusa judges her own posture. A cat slips through the shadows. It's got that smug walk temple cats have. Medusa smiles at it, and it promptly ignores her. Some things never change. A fact for your sleepy brain to nibble on. Athena was one of the few virgin goddesses in Greek mythology, and her temples were guarded fiercely. Only women were allowed in most parts, especially the inner sanctum, where Medusa now prays, dusts, and occasionally repositions flowers to bring out the marble tone. Fringe tidbit? Ancient Greeks believed certain flowers attracted divine attention, especially hyacinths, which Medusa currently arranges with way too much focus for a mortal teen. She lights a small offering lamp and mutters something about forgetting the rosemary again. You can't help but smile. Not everything in myth is blood and tragedy. Sometimes it's just burnt offerings and minor grocery fails. Out in the courtyard, a flute player rehearses, badly. Medusa winces at the sour notes and mutters, "That's 3 crows in a row. Ominous." You're pretty sure she's joking. Probably. She sits by the fountain, legs tucked beneath her, and pulls out a scroll, one written in that swirly early Greek no one understands anymore, except pretentious scholars and, apparently, Medusa. She reads aloud softly, letting the words melt into the night air. Her voice is calm, with a kind of sleepy rhythm that even the temple moths seem to enjoy. Somewhere above, stars blink lazily, and time slows. There's an older priestess watching her from the shadows, not in a creepy way, more like someone trying to solve a puzzle. You float past her, and if this were a movie, she'd be the one who later says, "I knew she was special." And maybe she is. Not just for her beauty, but because she doesn't flinch when wisdom stares back at her. Medusa doesn't worship blindly. She studies. She asks questions. In a culture that expects quiet devotion, she's got that dangerous mix of reverence and curiosity. Did you know some versions of the myth claim Medusa was once a priestess herself? Not just a helper, but a full-blown devotee of Athena, bound by vows of chastity and service. It's a detail many storytellers skip, probably because it complicates the usual monster punished for vanity narrative. But here in this quiet courtyard, it feels true. You can almost hear her whispering prayers, not to ask for favor, but for understanding. As she traces her fingers over the cool stone of the fountain's edge, you notice the reflection in the water. Her face serene, hair curled into loose, perfect spirals, no snakes in sight. Just a girl trying to understand the divine without losing herself. It's peaceful here. So peaceful, in fact, that even you, the invisible observer, start to feel your limbs grow heavy. Your breath slows. The sky above begins to blur, like the stars are melting into soft candlelight. And then she laughs. Not a big, dramatic laugh, just a tiny snort. Apparently, she remembered something funny, probably about that flute player. It's a little thing, but it echoes around the courtyard like a defiance. A mortal girl laughing in a temple of gods. You close your eyes for just a second. And when you open them again, the fountain is still bubbling, the moths are still circling the lamp, and Medusa's still there, gently swaying as she hums some old lullaby no one remembers anymore. But the wind? The wind carries something faint now, a warning, a chill, like the first breath before the plot thickens. You wake, or rather you continue, not with a jolt, but with that subtle, dreamy drift that comes when the story shifts gears without asking permission. You're still in the temple, still close to Medusa, but time has shifted a bit. Days have passed, maybe weeks. You've let go of counting. It's all blurry in that delicious, sleepy way where everything seems coated in honey and late afternoon sun. Now you follow Medusa beyond the temple, into the quiet tide pools and rocky cliffs near the sea. This is where she goes when she wants to escape incense and expectations. And, perhaps more importantly, this is where her sisters live. Ah yes, the sisters, Steno and Uriel. You drift over the rocks, careful not to stub your intangible toes, and settle near a crooked little shack woven from driftwood, coral, and about 17 types of seaweed. The sisters are, let's say, aesthetically gifted in the way Medusa is. But what they lack in symmetry, they make up for in loud opinions and weird hobbies. Steno, the older one, is grumbling about a fish that stole her spoon. Again. She's the strong one, muscular and constantly flexing without realizing it. Her idea of leisure is smashing clams open with her fists and sighing dramatically when they don't fight back. Uriel, meanwhile, is dancing barefoot in the sand to music only she can hear. She's been collecting seashells and organizing them by emotional resonance. Apparently, the purple ones are deeply disappointed but hopeful. You have no choice but to respect the system. You settle into the salty air and listen to them bicker. It's warm, familiar, chaotic. Medusa's the youngest, the pretty one, but also the one with that mysterious calm energy that annoys the others. She's been coming here more often lately, half for sisterly bonding, half to escape the increasingly weird vibes back at the temple. Fringe tidbit for your brain sponge: in some ancient versions of the myth, all three Gorgon sisters were monsters from birth, terrifying and immortal. But in later stories, especially the Roman ones, Medusa alone is mortal and originally beautiful. Scholars still argue whether this shift was due to evolving symbolism or just one poet trying to sell more scrolls by giving his monster a tragic backstory. Anyway, back to the tide pools. Medusa crouches by the water, running her fingers through her reflection. Her curls are pulled back today with a seashell comb gifted by Uriel, one of the rare times her sister made something functional. The comb is holding, for now, though there's a crab eyeing it like it wants to start a fight. Steno is off to the side braiding kelp ropes and muttering about sea bandits, which may or may not be real, while Uriel tries to teach a seagull to harmonize. You, being the ever-silent observer, perch on a driftwood log and watch this awkward sitcom unfold. And then, because the universe can't resist drama, Poseidon shows up, early. He's not riding a wave or flashing lightning, he just sort of strolls in, barefoot, shirtless, with that "I'm a god but emotionally unavailable" energy. His hair is wet in a way that probably took effort. He smells like salt, pride, and irresponsibility. Medusa stiffens. She wasn't expecting him today, or ever. The sisters fall silent.
You float a little higher, curious. "Medusa," he says, voice like a tidal undertow. "You haven't visited the cove lately." That's not a question. That's a guilt trip with seafoam. "I've been helping at the temple," she replies, calmly, too calmly. "There's been a lot of incense, very important." Poseidon tilts his head. He's not used to mortals deflecting. You can tell by the way his eyebrow twitches. Steno crosses her arms like she's ready to throw a rock at him. Euryale makes a dramatic gasp and vanishes behind a bush, which somehow catches fire. No one addresses this. A mainstream historical fact floats by in your mind like a curious fish. In Greek culture, the gods often used their powers to meddle in mortal lives. Not out of malice necessarily, more like really bored interns with nuclear buttons. Poseidon, in particular, had a track record for impulsive love affairs, some of which ended in storms, earthquakes, or aggressive dolphins. Medusa keeps her tone polite, respectful, but underneath you can feel it, resistance. She's not flattered by the god's attention. She's not swooning. She's calculating her options. He offers her a pearl. It's beautiful, iridescent. It probably grants wishes or contains a pocket universe. But Medusa just blinks slowly and says, "I already have a comb." Oh, burn. Poseidon does not like being dismissed. But he's a god, and gods don't do tantrums. They do omens. The sky rumbles faintly. The sea spits out a squid and then thinks better of it. There's a long, tense silence. Then Poseidon smiles, not the friendly kind, the kind that says, "I am a story, and you are now part of it." "I'll see you soon," he says, voice slipping into the cracks between the rocks. And just like that, he's gone. No wave, no lightning, just a puff of guilt-scented sea mist. The sisters rush in. "You can't be alone with him again," Steno says, wringing her hands. "He smells like wet ambition," Euryale adds, which, fair. "I won't," Medusa replies, but she's not entirely sure. Because here's the thing, she did used to visit him, just once or twice, nothing dramatic. A walk by the tide, a philosophical debate about oysters. But even back then, something about him felt tidal, like being near him meant eventually you'd get pulled under. Still, she thought she could handle it. And that, dear listener, is the kind of sentence that makes historians raise their eyebrows and write tragic endings. You trail her later that evening, back toward the temple, past fields of dry grass that catch the golden light like tiny torches. She's quiet, her steps slower. There's a ripple in the air, as if the myth is holding its breath. And you, floaty, dreamy you, begin to sense the shift. Like the story's about to take a turn, but not a sharp one, not yet. Just enough to make you feel like something once safe is now slightly off-kilter. Medusa reaches the temple. The air is still warm, but it doesn't comfort her the way it did before. She lights the lamps, places the flowers, repeats the same old rituals, but this time she forgets the rosemary again. And this time she doesn't laugh about it. You hover behind her as she kneels before the statue. Her prayer is silent, not pleading, just a wish. For things to stay simple, for hair to stay soft, for gods to stay in their lane. The statue doesn't answer, not yet. The nights grow heavier after that. Not colder. Greece doesn't really do cold the way other places do, but there's a certain weight to the moonlight now. You follow Medusa again, this time closer than usual, because she seems to be shrinking into herself. Her steps are careful, her shoulders tighter. She's not afraid yet, not quite, but she started listening for sounds that weren't there before. And you, soft as starlight and just as useless in a fight, stay near her like a sleepy shadow. The temple has grown quieter too, fewer prayers, more whispers. A priestess gives Medusa a look that is not kind. Another rearranges the offerings after she's placed them. It's all very passive-aggressive, which in ancient Greece is about as dangerous as an actual knife. You hear them muttering, not loud enough for her to hear, but just enough. About how she spends too much time by the sea, about how Poseidon lingers when she's around, about how no mortal should walk with that much grace inside a temple built for gods. And Medusa doesn't argue. She doesn't stomp or yell. She just grows quieter. Her mirror stays tucked away longer. The seashell comb gets left on a windowsill, forgotten. Her curls start to unravel. You drift beside her one morning as she scrubs the temple floors, not with reverence now, but with mechanical care, the way someone does when their mind is far, far away. You watch a single lock of hair fall in front of her face. It's still beautiful, of course, still soft, but it doesn't bounce anymore. It droops, like it's listening too. Mainstream historical fact time. In many ancient Greek temples, virgin priestesses were not only spiritual figures, they were symbols of purity and order, physically embodying the calm, rational divinity of goddesses like Athena. Any hint of impropriety, real or imagined, was scandalous. Fringe tidbit? Some texts hint that purity was often enforced through magical rituals that involved ash, cold water, or in one extremely niche case, standing in a circle of lemon slices. No, really. So yes, you could say Medusa's in a precarious position. Being beautiful in a sacred space meant being watched, being noticed, being judged. And one day, Poseidon returns. Not to the beach this time, no more dramatic sea entrances. This time, it's the temple, when no one's watching, when the lamps are half lit and the halls are nearly silent, when Medusa is alone. You don't see all of it. You're there, but your dream logic doesn't let you see straight. Time skips, shadows flicker. The moment itself doesn't want to be remembered clearly, just the aftertaste. There's a clash of divine presence and mortal breath. The scent of seawater floods the room. A vase tips over and shatters. Symbolic, subtle. Then the silence returns. And Medusa, standing in the sanctum, is no longer Medusa as you knew her. She doesn't cry, doesn't scream. She just goes still. Her robe is torn at the hem, and her hands shake, just barely. And you want to do something, anything, but you're made of mist and sighs. All you can do is watch as she kneels in front of the statue of Athena, once her goddess, once her guide, and whispers something so soft it doesn't even echo. A debate rises among scholars here. Historians still argue whether Athena's punishment was fueled by rage at Medusa for desecrating the temple, or if it was directed entirely at Poseidon, masked through a cruel form of divine retribution. Either way, the result is the same: cold, sudden, irrevocable. The transformation isn't loud. There's no thunderclap, no glowing light. It happens like a sigh. Medusa clutches her head. Then the snakes begin. It starts as a tingling at her scalp, a ripple beneath her skin. Then, one by one, her curls lift, not with the bounce of youth, but with the wriggle of something alive, something serpentine. You've seen a lot by now, but this is different. Her hair coils and hisses, each strand shedding its softness, becoming something ancient, something no mirror should ever reflect. Her face contorts, not with pain, but with confusion, disbelief. She doesn't scream. She just shakes her head slowly, as if she can toss the nightmare off her shoulders. She can't, and neither can you. You drift back as her reflection shimmers in the shattered pieces of the fallen ace. One shard catches her gaze, and turns to stone. You watch it, stone, instantly, like the world decided that moment was too dangerous to continue. Medusa stares at it, then at her hands, then at the rest of the temple, as if expecting someone to rush in and fix it. But no one does. She stumbles from the sanctum. Her feet scrape on the marble. The temple cat hisses and flees. Lamps flicker and die. The statue of Athena looms, impassive, divine, unforgiving. And you, poor dream floater, follow her into the night, unsure whether you're witnessing the birth of a monster or the breaking of a mortal. She runs, or tries to. Her steps are uneven now. The snakes, small at first, grow bolder. They tangle, snap, hiss. Her once silken hair now seethes like a nest of fury she never asked for. She reaches the cliffs. The sea stretches out below, moonlit and endless. She stands at the edge, chest heaving. The salt wind howls around her, and she screams into it. Not words, just raw sound. It echoes across the rocks, the tide pools, the night. And something in the world shifts. A stone lizard on a rock nearby turns gray and still. Not sleep still, not frightened still, permanently still. She sees it, her eyes go wide, and then the horror sinks in. She can't look anymore, not at herself, not at the world. She turns and flees into the caves below the cliff, into darkness, into solitude. You follow her, of course you do, but slower now, like you're walking through a myth that's solidifying, becoming legend. And deep in the cave, where no starlight reaches, she collapses. The snakes are quieter now, resting against her scalp like angry dreams. She curls into herself as far as she can. And you sit nearby, helpless, haunted, and strangely honored to witness the moment the world broke a girl so thoroughly it had to invent a new word, Gorgon, just to describe her. Outside, the world begins to whisper her name differently. And you close your eyes, not to block it out, but to remember it better. You wake again, if you can call it that.
This kind of dream doesn't have clear sleep cycles. It's just one long sigh, stretching into the dark. The cave is still, so still, like the world forgot it or was too scared to remember. Medusa hasn't moved much. Her breathing is shallow, her posture curled, but not fragile. No, this is something else. Not weakness, just waiting, like a storm that hasn't chosen its moment yet. The snakes stir, not much, just a slow, sleepy sway. They've begun to get used to themselves, testing their length, adjusting their coils. One of them, a tiny green one near her temple, yawns. Yes, yawns. You weren't ready for it either. She hasn't spoken in days, not aloud, maybe not at all. Outside the cave, the world keeps spinning. Time rolls forward, dragging rumors behind it like a child with a stick in the dust. The stories have started, of course. They always do. You know how humans are. One terrified fisherman whispers about a beautiful girl with cursed hair. A temple priest says her gaze turned a rat into granite. A poet scribbles down half a verse and sells it to a bard for a slice of bread. You hover near the entrance, invisible in the dim morning light, watching the coast begin to fill with speculation. Some say she angered Athena. Others say she seduced Poseidon and paid the price. Still others claim she was Athena, fallen from the heavens in a fit of vanity. No two tales agree. Historians still argue whether the earliest references to Medusa in myth were meant to inspire fear or pity. Some believe she was created purely as a cautionary tale, a woman punished for being too beautiful, too proud, too tempting. Others argue she was always a symbol of protective rage, a monstrous shield against injustice, her stare a mirror to the wrongs of the world. But none of them were there in the cave. You were. And right now, she's just tired. Eventually, her sisters come. Steno and Euryale, remember them? Kelp, chaos, and crunchy shellfish? Yeah, them. They appear at the cave mouth like twin thunderclouds wrapped in seaweed. They've heard the whispers. They've seen the scorched circles around the temple, and they've come running. Medusa! Euryale's voice cracks as she steps inside. There's a pause, the kind that stretches between heartbeats, and then, "Don't look at me," Medusa whispers.
You feel it before they do, that ripple of danger. The same shiver you get when you drop a mirror and catch your own reflection mid-fall. But Steno, practical as ever, tosses a linen shawl over Medusa's face and sits down like she owns the floor. "Well," she says, "this is new." And somehow, that helps. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, Medusa laughs. Just a little. Just enough to make the snakes relax, their little tongues flickering in confusion. The sisters stay. They bring fish, gossip, bad jokes. They argue about where to store fresh water and who left sea urchins in the sleeping area. They bicker over whether a cave is better than a temple, and whether Uriel's new obsession with moss gardens is practical or just a phase. And slowly, like plants in spring, Medusa begins to move again. She starts carving small patterns into the stone walls. Not grand murals, just little spirals and symbols. Repetitive, meditative. You watch her fingers trace the grooves over and over again, the snakes mimicking the motion like they're learning to draw. One night, she asks Uriel for a mirror. Uriel, to her credit, doesn't flinch. She simply reaches into a satchel, pulls out a small bronze hand mirror, and holds it out, handle first. Medusa takes it. She doesn't lift it right away, just holds it in her lap. Then slowly, as if her hands are moving without permission, she tilts it upward and sees herself. Or, more accurately, her reflection. It's not what she feared. The snakes are part of her now. not just clinging to her scalp like a bad wig, but woven into her presence. They blink when she blinks. They lean forward when she does, a strange, silent chorus. And her eyes, they're sharp, too sharp, like they've seen more than they were supposed to. But behind that, there's still her, still Medusa, still the girl who braided seaweed and forgot the rosemary. She places the mirror down, gently. Then she says, "I think I can control it." Steno stares. Control what? "The turning," Medusa says. "I don't think it happens all the time, only when I want it to." Pause. "Or when I'm really, really annoyed." Cue a look of panic from Uriel, who suddenly remembers she may have hidden Medusa's sandals out of habit. They test it, of course, carefully. Steno volunteers a turtle. It turns to stone instantly. Uriel offers a clump of moss. No change. Then they try it with a goat. Mixed results. The back half is still chewing cud. "Okay," Steno says, scratching her head. "So it's emotional." "Unreliable," Uriel mutters, poking the goat's stone leg. But Medusa, for the first time in what feels like years, smiles. "Mine," she says. "It's mine." That night, she sleeps deeper. You can feel it in the air, the kind of sleep that sinks all the way to your toes and pulls the dreams out like soft feathers. You stay near her because even though she can vaporize livestock now, there's still something fragile about the way she exhales. Not broken, not anymore, just different. The world will call her a monster, a creature, a warning. But you know better. She's not a nightmare. She's a response. She didn't choose this, but now she's learning how to live in it. The cave begins to feel less like an exile and more like a home. Steno puts up wind chimes made of fish bones and broken shell. Uriale discovers a knack for building clever traps that keep out curious animals and even more curious men. Medusa paints the walls with crushed berries and burnt charcoal, each swirl a memory, each symbol a piece of the girl she used to be. And you? You linger like the breeze, a patient witness, floating between soft shadows and whispered sighs. They fall into a rhythm. Wake up, forage, practice the gaze. Medusa crafts little clay statues, none of them with faces, just flowing robes and windswept poses. She calls them maybe people and sets them along the rocky ledge like a quiet audience. One of them, Steno knocks over and accidentally steps on. "Oops," she shrugs. Medusa just smiles. Now it's a warning statue. Uriale adds it to a growing path of crushed or suspiciously stone-shaped objects they call the "Don't Walk Here" zone. Very official. But word is still spreading. Men talk. Sailors talk louder. Eventually, a rumor winds its way to a local warlord who, shockingly, has more ego than sense. He decides, over a lavish dinner and too much wine, that the Gorgon must be hunted. Not because she's a threat, mind you, but because no woman should defy the gods and go unpunished. Classic logic. You hear his name once, in a dream, Lycos, which ironically means wolf. But you never see him, not really, just the aftermath. One morning, you wake to shouting, steel clashing, a scream that cuts the dawn in half. You rush out to find the sisters already in action. Uriale has a man trapped in a net made of vine and teeth. Steno is using a very large rock to explain repeatedly that intruders are not welcome. And Medusa? She's still by the fire, unmoving, her gaze fixed on one of the warriors who had the misfortune of meeting her eyes the moment he rounded the cave bend. He's stone now, a perfect statue, sword raised mid-swing, frozen forever in a moment of arrogance. Medusa doesn't cry, she doesn't even blink.
"I didn't want to," she whispers, and you know it's the truth. Mainstream historical fact: in Greek culture, certain sanctuaries were known as asilia, sacred places where the act of violence was forbidden, often protected by the gods themselves. To violate these spaces was a spiritual crime. The cave, while not officially marked, has become such a place to the sisters, a haven carved from pain and quiet rebellion. Fringe tidbit: some ancient texts mention sympathetic stones, fragments of rock that were believed to retain the essence of the last thing they touched, which might explain why one of the soldiers turned into a statue holding a chicken leg. He'd been snacking. Seriously.
The sisters drag the statue to the outer cliff and position it facing the sea. A reminder, Stheno says. A landmark, Uriem adds. An accident, Medusa says softly. But the world doesn't hear her version. The world only sees the stone. After that, they get clever. Medusa starts weaving hoods from thick reeds and fish skin heavy enough to drape over her eyes. She practices moving with her head down, learning the art of hearing before seeing. The sisters scout the shoreline. They map tides and moon patterns. They build clever little hiding tunnels and misdirection traps. Uriel even trains a crab to pinch strangers in the ankle. His name is Snips. He's weirdly loyal. Despite it all, attacks keep coming. Lycos sends more men, mercenaries, hunters, would-be heroes who think a woman with snakes must be some kind of riddle to solve. They don't last long. Some fall to Stheno's brute strength. Others get tangled in Uriel's web of triplines and stinging thorns. A few even turn tail and flee the moment they glimpse Medusa's silhouette in the torchlight. And some, well, they meet her eyes. One by one, the statues line the cliffs. The sisters joke about naming them. "That one's definitely regretful," says Uriel. "And this guy? Oh, he's lunch before battle." But Medusa grows quieter each time. You notice it, the stillness in her. Not from fear, not anymore, but from something deeper, heavier. She doesn't want to hurt them. She just wants them to stop coming. But mortals are stubborn, so she retreats farther into herself, stops sculpting, stops painting. Her maybe people crumble in the wind. You find her one afternoon curled beneath a ledge, her hands in the sand. "I didn't ask for any of this," she says to no one and everyone. And the snakes, in their strange empathy, go still. Historians still argue whether Medusa's transformation marked the death of her humanity or the evolution of it. Some say she lost her soul when Athena cursed her. Others argue she became divine in her own right, a symbol of rage and retribution granted terrifying grace. But in that moment, you don't see a monster or a goddess. You see a girl who just wants to sleep without dreaming of statues. Later, Stheno offers her a plan. "We could go north," she says. "There's talk of a forest where the fog never lifts." "Too cold," says Uriel. "East then, island caves, hidden lagoons." "Too damp." Medusa finally speaks. "We stay." Stheno blinks. "You sure?" "There's no safety out there. Only silence here, and that's enough." So they fortify the silence. The cave becomes a labyrinth. Clever turns, dead ends, mirrors that mislead. Uriel paints the walls with patterns that hypnotize intruders. Stheno crafts warning rocks, statues from those too foolish to listen, each posed in theatrical agony. Medusa sits near the cave's heart, surrounded by her sisters, guarded by shadows. And you sit nearby, watching her breathe. The snakes sway like lullabies, and the sea outside keeps roaring on, unaware of how much it's broken and how fiercely it is being survived. You dream in stone now. Not cold, lifeless stone, but smooth, sleeping kind, like river pebbles warmed by sun. Dreams where the world moves slowly, like syrup poured from a height, where footsteps echo across marble halls and statues whisper when no one is listening. Because the statues are everywhere now. They fill the cliff path, line the cave's entrance, peek from behind gull-worn boulders. Warriors, hunters, and the occasional fool who wandered too far while foraging for sea urchins. All of them caught mid-step, mid-thought, mid-regret. Medusa doesn't look at them anymore. She walks past like they're shrubs or tide markers. Like this is just what life looks like now, a garden of other people's mistakes. The sisters start playing a game. Guess his final thought. That one, Steno points, definitely was thinking, I'm immune to curses. Uriel squints. Nah, more like, wait, she's actually hot. You chuckle, but Medusa just gives a tight smile and keeps walking. She's not in the mood for games lately. Her hair's changed again. The snakes are bigger now, smoother. Their scales glint in moonlight like polished obsidian. They don't hiss much anymore. They hum. A soft, rhythmic vibration you feel more than hear. Like a warning wrapped in a lullaby. She feeds them bits of dried fish, sometimes honey, sometimes slices of fig, which they seem oddly fond of. They've got a sweet tooth, she murmurs once. So do you. One night, she paints again. Not much, just a single long line across the far wall of the cave, almost invisible in the dark. A jagged mark, like a scar. It's the shoreline, she says, eyes distant. I keep dreaming it's gone. You want to ask what she means, but you already know. The sea feels farther now, like even it is retreating. Fringe myth alert. In some lost variations of Medusa's legend, she was never slain by a hero, but simply disappeared, leaving behind a cliff that devoured the tides, as if her grief pulled even the ocean inward. The sisters stay busy. Uriel has trained a seagull to squawk 3 times if it spots men with swords. Steno builds a rain catcher from hollow driftwood and woven kelp. They talk about building a wall. Medusa says nothing. The silence grows deeper.
One day, Uriale returns from a foraging trip with strange news. They're calling her a goddess now, she says, plopping down beside the fire. Who? Medusa asks, without looking up. You, Uriale answers. Some priest near Corinth claims your gaze cleanses sin, says turning to stone is a form of divine purification. Medusa snorts. Well, that's new. Historians still argue whether Medusa's image on ancient shields and temples was a mark of fear or reverence. Was she a monster meant to be warded off, or a protector, warding others away? The truth, as usual, is somewhere in the smoke. Theno chuckles. Think we should charge? 2 chickens and a goat from moral absolution, Uriale adds. But Medusa just stares at the fire. Later, you follow her to the cliff. She walks with that careful grace she's developed, shoulders low, steps light, like she's afraid the earth might crack under her. The ocean is glass tonight, no waves, just a quiet gleam stretching into forever. She holds something in her hand. A necklace. Simple leather cord, 1 carved bead. You recognize it. It was hers, back when she still wore sandals and whispered apologies to temple cats, the last piece of before. She tosses it into the sea. No drama, no speech, just a quiet flick of the wrist. The snakes flick their tongues. They seem to understand. You drift closer, feeling the weight of her silence. She's mourning. Not the men, not the strangers, but the versions of herself she'll never be again. The sisters find her there, eventually. They sit beside her, no words, just warmth. You're not sure how long the four of you stay there. Time stops making sense. The wind shifts, and then a change. From the trees beyond the cliffs, new sounds. Drums, voices, the crack of boots on stone. This time, it's not hunters, it's pilgrims. A group of villagers who have somehow decided that Medusa is sacred. They come bearing gifts, dried figs, clay pots of wine, and an awkwardly carved wooden statue that's clearly meant to be her, snakes and all. "We come in peace," their leader says, hands raised. Theno raises an eyebrow. "Do you usually come with swords?" The man laughs nervously. "Only for the journey, not for her." They kneel. They ask for blessings. One young girl, barely 12, offers Medusa a bundle of rosemary and says, "My mother says you protect women." Medusa blinks. For the first time in days, the snakes perk up with curiosity, not warning. They taste the air. Medusa kneels beside the girl. "You're not afraid?" she asks. The girl shakes her head. "You look like someone who's tired." And just like that, Medusa smiles. Something softens. The pilgrims stay a night, then two. They leave quietly, placing their offerings along the path like breadcrumbs for the next group. Within weeks, more come. Not many, just a trickle, but it's enough. The cave is no longer just a hiding place. It's becoming something else. A sanctuary. By now, you've memorized the sound of sand shifting under cautious feet. You can tell the difference between a trespasser and a worshiper just by the rhythm of their breath. Short and sharp if they're hunting, long and uneven if they're hoping. The pilgrims keep coming. They arrive in quiet clusters, eyes wide, offerings trembling in their hands. Some leave tokens, carved birds, polished stones, even bits of poetry scribbled on scraps of leather. Others come seeking peace, solace for lost children, strength to leave husbands, or simply permission to exist without being soft or silent. Medusa meets them with stillness. She doesn't speak much. She lets Stheno and Uriel do the talking. Stheno handles logistics. No, you may not camp directly inside the cave. While Uriel listens to stories and doles out herbal tea laced with calming moss. Medusa remains the center around which it all moves, an eye of calm surrounded by storm and sandals. At night, she watches the stars. She started mapping them with charcoal on the cave ceiling, long, lazy constellations of her own design. One looks like a snake curling around a mountain. Another's clearly a goat doing battle with a fish. You're not sure what myth that is, but you like it. One afternoon, a child presses a single question into the silence. "Are you a goddess?" Medusa pauses, then shrugs. "I'm tired enough to be one." Mainstream historical fact. In later periods of ancient Greece, mortals were often elevated to divine or semi-divine status based on local cult followings, especially women who were martyred or seen as protectors. It wasn't rare for a local shrine to a heroine to eventually be absorbed into regional worship practices. These weren't Olympians, but they were sacred just the same. But not everyone's thrilled about Medusa's transformation into a folk icon. Word spreads, faster now, and with it, the old stories twist. She's no longer just a monster or victim. Depending who you ask, she's a healer, a demon, a goddess of vengeance, or the spirit of storm-tossed women. A sea oracle, a seductress, a curse. One scroll from Athens describes her as a head with writhing serpents resting atop a mountain of bones, demanding sacrifice beneath the full moon. Which, frankly, sounds awesome, but also completely made up. Quirky tidbit: one legend claims that statues of Medusa wink at you if you whisper a secret in front of them. This becomes a popular game among children, though no one's entirely sure if the winking means approval or "I'm turning you to stone now." The sisters try to keep the peace. Uriel patrols the cliffs with Snips the crab, now bulkier and significantly more aggressive. Stheno invents a whole new signaling system involving cave echoes and reflective plates. But tensions rise. The pilgrims bring prayers. The soldiers bring spears. It was only a matter of time.
One evening, as sea fog curls over the hills, a group of armored men appears on the ridgeline. No offering bowls, no hesitation. They're here for cleansing, they claim, but not the kind with herbs and water. We've come to free the land of her blight, their leader calls. Medusa doesn't answer. She simply lowers her hood and walks to the cave mouth. The soldiers ready their weapons. You hold your breath. But Medusa doesn't look at them. She looks through them, past them. Her voice, rare and steady, slices the air. Go home. One man charges and crumbles mid-step, stone where skin should be. One knee locked mid-lunge, mouth frozen in a battle cry that never finishes. The others falter. They retreat without looking back, dragging the statue with them, as if ashamed to leave their comrade and too frightened to leave him behind. The pilgrims say it was a miracle. The sisters call it a Tuesday. But Medusa? She disappears into the shadows and doesn't speak for 3 days. Her heart's getting heavier, Stheno murmurs, cleaning a knife that's never seen battle. Not from guilt, from carrying too much of everything else. Uriale nods. She needs to be something, not just hide. You agree. That night, Medusa emerges and walks to the cliff's edge. She takes off her hood. The snakes lift, sensing the wind, curling upward like smoke. And then she does something you've never seen before. She sings. It's not a melody you recognize. It whines and breaks like a song remembered from a dream or from the mouth of the sea itself. Her voice is low, grainy, half ocean, half wound. And slowly, softly, the statues hum in response. Not literally, of course, but the air around them vibrates differently, as if even the stone is leaning forward to listen. Historians still argue whether this moment, recorded later in regional oral tales, was symbolic or real. Was it meant to show her connection to the divine? A metaphor for grief finding voice, or just a myth born from too many nights staring at statues in the dark? You know what you heard, and so do the snakes. They sway in time with the song, and when she finishes, they settle across her shoulders like silent sentinels ready to guard something newly awakened. From then on, the cave stops being a cave. It becomes a temple. They don't call it that, of course. No marble pillars, no gold. Just stories whispered over cooking fires. Pilgrims placing candles in broken shells. Children leaving bracelets made of sea glass. Someone paints a sign on a flat stone near the beach path. The Lady of Eyes and Silence welcomes the brave, not the foolish. Medusa laughs when she sees it. Sounds like a pub. Uriale adds, we should start serving eel soup. But you can tell it matters to her. The world is changing, and for once, it might not be trying to kill her. You wake to the smell of sea fennel and something sizzling in a shell. Uriale's cooking again, balancing her pan over a carefully built rock stove. It smells edible, maybe even good. The cave is warm with morning light, filtered through hanging vines the sisters planted as a privacy curtain. There's laughter outside. Not the nervous giggles of pilgrims who don't know where to put their sandals, but real, easy laughter. Children playing on the shoreline, kicking driftwood and pretending it's a hydra. Their parents watching, sipping warm kelp tea. This isn't just a sanctuary anymore. It's a village. A slow, mossy kind of village, grown from fear and held together by hush. Someone's even built a rudimentary bathhouse with heated stones and seawater chutes. Another group is digging terraces for herbs. There are rules now. boundaries, rotations for fishing, foraging, and night watch. Steno starts assigning chores. She has a clipboard. You're not sure where she got it. Everyone works, she says, even ghosts. She means you. Medusa, she's changing too. Not in the monster to Messiah way, although yes, there's still that, but in the quiet ways. You notice she's sleeping more, dreaming deeper, painting again. Her murals have expanded across the walls now, swooping, coiling shapes that seem abstract at first, but if you stare long enough, they begin to tell a story. A woman, a temple, a sky split in half. Her hair, her snakes, have grown calmer. Not tame, never that, but thoughtful. They nuzzle her when she sits, coil protectively when she speaks. One even curls gently around the wrist of a sobbing widow who came to ask for strength to bury her past. The snakes listen, and you're starting to suspect they understand more than anyone thinks. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek iconography, snakes were not always sinister. In many traditions, they symbolized healing, rebirth, and guardianship. Temples of Asclepius, the god of medicine, kept live snakes as sacred animals. The staff with a coiled serpent, still used today as a symbol of health. So maybe Medusa was always misread. Maybe this whole time she wasn't cursed, just redefined by people who couldn't understand what power looked like without fear. But not everyone's content with peaceful ambiguity. The stories outside the sanctuary twist further. In Athens, one play opens with a character screaming, "She turned my virtue to sand," which doesn't even make grammatical sense. The chorus wears snake wigs and slithers in unison, chanting nonsense syllables. It's popular among the wine-soaked elite. One traveler brings news from Delphi. They say the oracle has forbidden heroes from seeking her, says her fate is beyond man's reach. Medusa raises an eyebrow. How considerate. Then there are the copycats. One pilgrim shows up claiming to have inherited the gift and keeps trying to turn people to stone by blinking hard at them. Steno gently guides him to the exit. Uriel gives him a muffin. They're not unkind, just done. And yet, the danger feels thicker now. Not swords exactly, but ideas. Ideas are harder to dodge. They creep in through dreams and gossip and half-true scrolls. They ride the waves, reshaping the world's memory of you. Fringe myth? In some local versions, Medusa doesn't live on cliffs, but beneath the sea, breathing through gills and luring sailors to their death. She sings them lullabies and turns their bones to coral. These tales merge her with sirens, another misunderstood group of dangerous women who didn't smile enough. You wonder what it's like to become someone else's metaphor. Medusa doesn't talk about it, but you can feel it in her, this quiet tension coiled just beneath her ribs. Not fear, not anymore, but weight. Like she's always walking with one foot in her own legend and the other trying not to slip. One night, there's a storm. Not just a drizzle, a storm. Sky-cracking, wave-throwing, tree-snapping chaos. It rips through the cliffs like a beast, tearing vines and tossing prayer stones into the sea. Medusa stands in the mouth of the cave, arms crossed. She doesn't flinch. Neither do the snakes. They rise with the wind, undulating in the lightning like dancers caught in a trance. For a moment, the whole sky seems to pause, watching her. Then comes a crack of thunder so loud it knocks a statue from its base. And she laughs. A sharp, fierce sound like rocks breaking into diamonds. Afterward, when the storm passes, she helps rebuild. No ceremony, no commands, just mud on her hands and soot on her face. She pulls children from under fallen branches, rebinds broken torches, gathers eggs from frightened birds, and hums softly to calm them. The villagers watch her not with awe, but familiarity. "She's like the weather," one boy says, watching her braid a reed fence. "Scary sometimes, but not mean." And that's the difference. They don't fear her anymore. They know her, and it changes everything. Historians still argue whether this was the beginning of the Medusa cults, those odd, localized shrines dedicated not to Olympian gods, but to a serpent woman of the sea cliffs. Some say it was rebellion, others say it was desperation, but maybe it was just people being tired of waiting for permission to worship something that made them feel seen. In the following days, Medusa does something unexpected. She holds a council. Yes, a council. She and the sisters sit on driftwood benches under the fig tree. Villagers gather around, awkward but curious. Someone brings snacks. Medusa clears her throat. "I think it's time we talk about what this place is." And the discussion begins. It's not fast, it's not clean. Someone argues about where to place the compost communal. Another insists that prayer hours be optional but encouraged. There's even a surprisingly heated debate over whether cats are sacred or just smug. But it's real. They're building something. Not a kingdom, a home. You can smell the sun before you feel it, warm and sweet, with a hint of salt and figs drying on woven mats. The cliffs have stopped whispering about danger. Now they mutter about chores, love triangles, and whose goat keeps eating the prayer offerings. It's no longer a sanctuary for the lost, it's a haven for the found and the frequently confused. And Medusa? She's hosting a poetry night. Yes, really. Blankets are spread over the sand. Torches burn low, casting gentle shadows. A girl with a voice like rain reads a sonnet to her ex, who is pretending not to cry. A bearded fisherman recites something he claims is an ancient hymn, but is clearly just improvised rhyming about crabs. Then, after a long pause, Medusa stands. She walks to the center, quiet as wind in the reeds. Her snakes settle against her shoulders like a scarf woven from memory. She clears her throat and speaks a single line. "Even monsters dream of gardens." The crowd is still. Then someone claps, then another, and soon everyone's applauding, half in disbelief, half in awe. The line isn't long, it's not fancy, but it feels like something ancient dug up from beneath the bones of the world. Quirky tidbit? Ancient Greek festivals included not just athletic and musical competitions, but spoken word contests too. Some were even anonymous, with masked poets submitting works under pseudonyms. It was common for women, who couldn't publicly perform, to have their poems spoken by others, making Medusa's impromptu reading oddly traditional. Afterward, a teenager with ink-stained hands runs up and says, "Can I tattoo that on my leg?" Medusa blinks. "Why your leg?" He shrugs. "Seems poetic." She laughs. Something inside her is softening, not weakening, softening, the kind of strength that doesn't have to raise its voice anymore, the kind that doesn't mistake silence for surrender. You watch her, day by day, become something else again. Not a victim, not a symbol, not even a goddess, just a person. One morning, she's carving driftwood into little snake charms, gifts for the children, when Euryale rushes in, breathless. They're coming. Medusa doesn't ask who. She already knows. You feel it too, the air thinning, the birds too quiet, the waves no longer singing. Soldiers. But not the clueless scouts from before. These are trained, fast, backed by someone with coin and scrolls and authority. Someone with a reputation. You hear the name before you see the helmet. Perseus. Mainstream historical fact. Perseus is one of the most celebrated heroes of Greek mythology, credited with slaying Medusa and rescuing Andromeda. He's often portrayed as brave, clever, and pious. But few myths agree on how he found Medusa, or whether she was even hostile when he arrived. This version? This one feels off from the start. He doesn't come alone. His men clear the path with torches, knocking over sacred stones and scaring birds from their nests. Villagers hide behind trees and whisper to each other in shaky voices. Perseus walks with the confidence of someone who's never been told no. His armor shines like it was polished by ego itself. The shield on his back gleams unnaturally, polished obsidian rimmed in silver. He's brought the reflective one. And worse, he's smiling. Medusa watches him approach. No fear, no fury, just recognition. Perseus stops several yards away and raises his hands in mock peace. "Lady of Silence," he says, clearly enjoying himself, "I've come to end your suffering." Medusa tilts her head. "I'm not suffering." He pauses. "You've been cursed." "I've been busy." He tries again. "You're unnatural." She gestures to the garden, the children peeking behind fig trees, the sea still breathing steadily below them. Unnatural is subjective. He frowns. "I was sent by the gods." She sighs. They really need a hobby. Historians still argue whether Perseus believed he was doing something noble, or if his mission was more about fame and political gain. In most myths, Athena guides him, but whether she truly despised Medusa or used the story for propaganda is still debated. You're no scholar, but you've seen Medusa hold a child's broken ankle and whisper it quiet. You've seen her mourn a dead crab. You've seen her wash seaweed out of her sister's hair. This isn't a monster. This is home. Perseus doesn't see that. He steps forward. The villagers shout. Stheno unsheaths a blade she swore she buried. Euryale lifts her hands, not in defense, but in plea. Medusa raises a hand. Everyone stops. She walks to Perseus, slow and steady. When she's just close enough, he pulls the mirrored shield between them. "Don't come any closer," he warns. She shrugs. "Afraid to see me?" "Afraid to be you," he spits. And then he lunges. But Medusa does not turn him to stone. She does not strike, or scream, or summon a storm. She steps aside. Just enough. Perseus stumbles past her, shield raised high, striking only air. He turns, furious. She meets his eyes. No curse, no magic, just truth. "You came here to fight an idea," she says, "but I'm not your idea anymore." The snakes lift, not to strike, but to watch. Perseus hesitates. Then, for the first time, he lowers the shield. He looks at her, really looks, and he sees. Not a beast, not a conquest, a woman. One who chose to survive. He backs away, slow, reluctant, confused. "Tell them what you saw," she says gently. He nods once and leaves. No statues this time, just footprints in the sand, fading with the tide. Later, when the torches are relit and the villagers emerge, someone whispers, "So, is it over?" Medusa doesn't answer, because it's never really over. But for the first time, she feels seen. And that's a start. The stars that night are softer than usual. They don't blaze or dance. They just exist, quietly, like tiny truths scattered across the sky. You lie on your back in the garden, next to a fig tree that's somehow grown 2 feet taller in the last week. A few fireflies hover lazily, blinking like they've got nowhere urgent to be. You hear footsteps, not soldier boots or anxious shuffle, but familiar bare feet, the soft patter of someone who knows how not to disturb the moss. Medusa settles beside you, her snakes rustling gently. They're calmer now, less defensive, more curious. One flicks its tongue near a firefly, decides it's not worth the effort, and coils into a loose spiral. She sighs.
Not a heavy sigh, just a human one. "Well," she says, "that was awkward." You snort. She's talking about Perseus, obviously. Word has spread faster than a harpy with a grudge. Already, there are traveling scribes offering to transcribe the non-slaughter for posterity. A group of bards wants to put on a musical called The Girl with the Glare. She turned them away with a kind smile and a basket of figs. "I didn't want to be remembered," she murmurs, picking at a blade of grass. "I wanted to live." There's a long pause, the kind that lets crickets fill the silence. Mainstream historical fact? While Perseus was mythologized as Medusa's killer, some lesser-known versions claimed he never actually struck the blow, that her death was exaggerated, misremembered, or even fabricated entirely for heroic narrative. Fringe tidbit? In a few obscure vases from the 5th century BCE, Medusa is depicted alive, seated calmly with children around her, while Perseus stands at a distance, shield lowered. These are often dismissed as symbolic interpretations, but what if they weren't? What if they were the real story? She speaks again. "They'll never stop trying to fix me in place, stone me in memory, if not in body, a warning for being angry, or messy, or powerful without permission." You roll onto your side and look at her. The moonlight finds the edges of her face, makes her look carved, but soft, like marble that's finally exhaled. "Then don't let them," you say. She blinks. "Write it yourself," you add. "Your story, not theirs." The snakes perk up like they understand narrative ownership. She laughs once, gently. "You're dangerous," she says. "You make it sound possible." And maybe it is. The next day, she begins to write. Not on parchment, too fragile, too flammable. She carves. Into walls, driftwood, clay tablets, smooth stones stacked like cairns. Not just her story, their stories. Euryala's first prayer, Steno's laughter during battle training, the old woman who brought her a gift of sea salt and stayed to learn how to mend nets. She writes in spiral patterns, like snake tracks, so you have to walk to read them. Circle the cave, the garden, the cliffside. The act itself becomes ritual. Villagers follow suit. One paints his dreams in crushed berry dye. Another inscribes her dead husband's jokes on scallop shells and hides them under stepping stones for children to find. This isn't mythology anymore. It's memory. Messy, flawed, but living. Historians still argue whether this movement, the Whispering Stones as they came to be called, was religious or cultural. Some say it began as oral tradition before evolving into a deliberate counter-mythology. Others insist it was never about Medusa at all, but about agency. You walk through it each day, this labyrinth of stories, all true in their own way. There's one about a boy who talked to ghosts, another about a woman who built a boat from dreams. Some are hilarious, some hurt. None are simple. One afternoon, Medusa brings you a cup of pine tea and says, "Let's talk about names." You blink. What's wrong with Medusa? She shrugs. It's not mine, not really. It means guardian, which is fine, but it was given after the temple, after the snakes, after the narrative turned sour. So what would you pick? She considers. Something simple, something small. She likes dia, she says, just that. Not short for anything, just a clean, single spark of a word. She tries it out. Dia of the cliffs, dia of the quiet, Dia who drinks her tea too fast. It suits her. You ask if she'll ever leave the cliffs. She smiles. Why would I? I built this, and it's still becoming. Later that week, a new family arrives. They're tired, dusty, covered in travel sweat and nerves. The father stammers something about having nowhere else to go. Dia, Medusa, Dia just smiles and says, "Then welcome home." They cry. The snakes don't even flinch, and things keep growing. They build a library. Well, kind of. It starts as a place to store etched stones and clay tablets, but quickly morphs into a storytelling circle, a music den, a place where knowledge and imagination blur together. Children call it the word nest. There's a hand-painted sign that says, "Truth optional, compassion mandatory." Fringe tidbit? There's a minor myth, often overlooked, that speaks of a serpent library, guarded by women whose hair writhed with knowing. Scholars dismiss it as symbolic, but you're not so sure anymore. Maybe this is that place, or maybe you're just helping write it. One night, someone paints Medusa again. Not with fangs or wide eyes or snakes striking mid-snarl. No, she's seated in a garden, smiling faintly, with a child asleep on her lap and her hair gently swaying in the breeze. And in the corner, barely visible, is the reflection of Perseus, shield down, sword forgotten, watching from the trees. They hang it in the word nest. She sees it the next morning, pauses, then nods. "It's not exactly how it happened," she says, "but close enough." You realize then, she's not afraid of being misremembered. Not anymore. Because now, she's part of the remembering. And no one, not gods, not heroes, not bards with aggressive lyres, can take that away. You wake one morning to birds that sound almost mechanical, staccato chirps like someone's twisting a music box too fast. The cliffs are damp with sea mist, and everything feels expectant, like the air is holding its breath. Medusa's snakes are unusually alert. They twitch in unison, heads tilting toward the horizon. She squints into the gray-blue light, frowns slightly, and mutters, "That's new." What's new, it turns out, is a man with a scroll too large for his body and a beard too carefully curled to be local. He's dressed like an Athenian bureaucrat, so yes, a little ridiculous, and riding a donkey that looks like it regrets every life choice it has made. He reaches the garden and clears his throat with excessive drama. "Medusa, Gorgon, monster formerly of note." Medusa raises a brow. "I mean," he backpedals, sweating, "respected citizen of, this fine community." He hands her the scroll. She doesn't open it. She just stares at him. He sweats more. "It's an offer." "An offer?" she repeats. He nods. "From the Athenian Council. A proposal to formally recontextualize your legend." You both blink at that. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Athens had a long tradition of retroactively rebranding mythical figures to suit political agendas. Heroes were sometimes reclassified as demigods, former villains as tragic figures, and religious festivals were renamed entirely to absorb cults into state-sanctioned narratives. Apparently, Medusa, now Dia, depending on how close you are, is next in line. They want to include you in the public pantheon, the man continues, as a cautionary symbol turned protector, with statues and possibly a civic holiday, one of the minor ones. He adds that last part a bit apologetically. Also, he says, they're offering a stipend. The snakes hiss, not angrily, but in that universal way creatures do when they're too tired to be impressed. She finally takes the scroll, unrolls it, and reads in silence. Then she says, "No." The man blinks. "But?" "No," she repeats. "But this could cement your legacy." "That's not my legacy," she replies. "That's yours. Yours to file, yours to rewrite. I've already written mine." She nods toward the stones, the garden, the children playing near the fig trees, the prayer flags fluttering from driftwood poles. "I don't need to be sanitized for your records." He opens his mouth again, then sees her expression and decides to retreat instead. The donkey, to its credit, appears relieved. Historians still argue whether Medusa was ever officially deified by any major Greek city-state. Some scrolls suggest she was offered posthumous veneration in small rural communities, though these were likely independent of the mainstream pantheon.
Athens never made her a goddess, but they did absorb elements of her imagery into shields, coins, and temple carvings. You'd think Medusa would be angry.
But she's just amused. Later, over pine tea, she muses aloud. I used to dream of being remembered. Now, I just want a few people to remember me correctly. You sip your tea. That's still legacy. She smiles. No, that's intimacy. You both sit for a while, watching the sea lick the rocks. A week later, a group of traveling artists arrives. They've heard about the word nest. They want to contribute. But not with stories, with movement. They start building a stage, well, more like a clearing, with woven grass mats and smooth stepping stones arranged in crescents. They begin a play. No scripts, just improvisation. Everyone's invited. The first scene involves a snake who wants to be a writer and keeps turning her quill into stone by accident. It's wildly inaccurate. The snake hisses in protest. The crowd loves it. Medusa? She laughs until she snorts. Quirky tidbit. While Greek tragedy and comedy are often viewed as highly structured forms today, early versions were largely improvised and deeply participatory. Spectators weren't just passive. They often yelled, corrected, or even joined in. Think of it as the ancient version of open mic night mixed with interpretive dance. Soon, the garden stage becomes a regular ritual. Once a week, people gather to retell and reinterpret their stories. One week, Medusa is a sorcerer with bad posture and a love for moss. The next, she's a baker cursed to only make cakes shaped like helmets. Each version ends differently. Sometimes she saves the village. Sometimes the village saves her. Sometimes no one is saved, but everyone shares a peach and learns to be better neighbors. At first, Medusa is wary. But slowly, she starts performing too. One night, she plays Athena. Her impersonation is so deadpan that Steno nearly falls out of her chair laughing. I decree seriousness, she says in a nasally, mock-divine tone, and mandatory forehead armor for everyone. You realize what's happening. She's reclaiming the narrative, not just with quiet dignity, but with humor, with absurdity. Because you can't fear something you've already laughed at. She doesn't erase the past, she just redraws it, with crayons instead of chisels. Fringe historians have suggested that satire might have been a way oppressed groups subtly rewrote myths without overt defiance. A fool character mocking the gods wasn't just comic relief, it was coded resistance. Medusa's new performance ritual? That's legacy, yes, but also rebellion with a punchline. And the children? They adore her. They braid ribbons into her snakes. One draws her a picture labeled Miss Medusa's House of Feelings. She tapes it to the cave wall with honey. You realize something subtle but huge. She's no longer waiting for the world to change. She is the world changing. Slowly, patiently. One skit, one stone, one bedtime story at a time. And you feel it too. That hum beneath your ribs. That quiet shift. You're not just witnessing a myth unwind, you're living inside its rewrite. You're planting beans with a stick. Not even a fancy stick, just one you found by the tide pools that seemed vaguely responsible. It's morning, misty and damp, and the cliffs smell like lavender and salt. The ground squishes beneath your sandals as you poke tiny holes and drop each bean in like a secret. Next to you, Medusa, Dia, watches from a low rock, snakes tucked and sleepy. She's holding a basket of herbs, braiding thyme into rosemary like it's a hobby that accidentally became spiritual. You know, she says, I used to think solitude was the only safe place. You nod. You get that. She tilts her head. But I never imagined peace could look like this. Dirt under my nails, that kid over there asking if he can paint my elbow, and you, digging holes with a C-stick. You smirk. It's a highly trained agricultural implement. She grins. The garden has grown. So have the people. More travelers arrive, Some come just to visit, others stay. They pitch tents at first, then build with driftwood and scavenged stone. The community becomes its own little pulse, a soft hum of life tucked just beyond myth's sharp edges. They name the village Eclida. It doesn't mean anything directly. It's not in any known tongue. But they say it sounds like wind passing through old reeds, or like a name forgotten too long ago to remember its origin. Mainstream historical fact: ancient communities often sprung up around hermits, oracles, or those rumored to have divine insight. People who didn't seek followers, but got them anyway. Some of these settlements eventually formed their own microcultures with customs distinct from the mainland. Eclida is exactly that. People come seeking safety, or truth, or maybe just a place to breathe. They bring their own stories. One woman insists she once drank tea with Apollo, but he refused to pay. A fisherman claims his dreams are maps to places that don't exist yet. A boy paints butterflies on every surface he can find and says each one traps a bad dream. Nobody argues. Here, no story has to be proven. It just has to be shared. Quirky tidbit: in some obscure texts, there's reference to the Isle of the Unwritten, a place scholars have never located, but is described as a gathering spot for forgotten tales and characters who wandered off the scroll. Eclida feels suspiciously like that place. And Dia? She becomes something else. Not a queen, not a prophet, definitely not a monster. More like an anchor. She listens, she laughs, she plants lemon balm beside the stage and teaches children how to balance sea stones. She still occasionally turns things to stone, but now it's more of a party trick than a curse. One afternoon, she gathers the kids. "Okay," she says, "today we make monsters." They cheer. Each child draws their own creature, one with 10 knees and glowing toes, another with wings made of spoons, one that only eats pickles and speaks in rhymes. She asks, "Are they scary?" The kids shout, "No!" Why not?
A small girl shrugs, "Because we made them." And there it is. Legacy by design, not default. Historians still argue whether these communities had any influence on formal Greek myth. Some say no, these pockets were too remote, too undocumented. Others point to fragments of alternative versions, hints of Medusa not as a villain, but as a wise woman, a nurturer, a mother of many metaphors. One scroll found near Corinth speaks of a snake-tressed one who turned sorrow to stone so it could not spread. Most academics call it poetic nonsense. You know better. You've seen it. There's a new ritual now. Once a season, at full moon, the people of Eclida walk a spiral path from the cliff's edge to the garden's heart. Along the way, they place tokens, stones, shells, written fears folded small. When they reach the center, they sit quietly. Dia stands before them, not to preach, not to perform, just to hold space. Then they burn the spiral, not with flame, with story. Each person takes a turn telling one truth they've been afraid to name. A secret, a wish, a hurt that still breathes. As the words unwind, the spiral loosens. By morning, the path is clean. And the tokens? Buried under a tree with silver leaves. You walk it too. You say your piece. No one claps, no one laughs, no one argues. They just nod like, yes, this too belongs here. It's not erasure, it's compost. Everything nourishes something. You start to see other changes. People make tiny altars, not to gods, but to ideas. One honors kindness, another curiosity. A third is just a basket labeled for things that didn't work out. People leave tokens there too. Failed sketches, broken jewelry, love letters addressed to no one. You realize Dia has created a world where the failed and the fractured aren't banished, they're honored. And honestly,
you're not sure you want to leave. The outside world, with its clean borders and approved myths, seems brittle now. Here, truth wiggles, it shifts shape. It dances under fig trees. One day, Dia asks, "What would you want remembered?" You blink. Not because you don't know, because no one's ever asked like they meant it. You think for a long time. Then you answer, "That I made space for stories." She nods. "Good," she says. "That's what I wrote too." You laugh, and the snakes hiss softly, like applause.
You wake before sunrise, not because anything's wrong, but because the world is quiet in a way that feels like an invitation. The garden hums, the sea breathes, and for a moment, it's like all the stories you've ever heard are curled asleep in the soil beneath you. Medusa is already up. She's in the grove, barefoot, running her hands along the bark of an old fig tree like she's reading a message written in another lifetime. One of the snakes yawns. "Morning," she says, not looking up. "Didn't know trees sent texts," you say. She smirks. "This one's gossiping." You sit beside her. She smells like mint and wet clay. There's something different in the air, heavier maybe. Not bad, just old. She notices you noticing. "It's time," she says. "For what?" "For the spiral to close." You don't ask what she means. You've lived here long enough to understand that some things unfold in silence before they ever reach words. The village prepares. People gather feathers, polish stones, stitch new banners out of old fabric. One boy writes poems on dried kelp strips and ties them to tree branches. They flutter like sea ghosts. Medusa paints her face, not with war paint, but with soft streaks of ochre and green. You help. It feels ceremonial, like dressing history for a nap. Mainstream historical fact. Many ancient rites involved cyclical storytelling, with communities returning again and again to the same myth, each time telling it a little differently, until the final version was not a version, but theirs. The retelling itself became sacred. Tonight is Eclida's final retelling, not because the village is ending, but because a myth has reached its last breath. People gather around the stage. Children sit in laps. The sea whispers below. Someone hands out roasted dates. The spiral is drawn in sand, lined with tiny bones and bits of pottery. Medusa steps into it. This time, she doesn't play Athena or some snake baker with mystical muffins. She plays herself, but not the version they all know. She starts at the beginning. Not the violent one, not the curse. Before that, before even the temples and prayers and monsterhood. She talks about climbing fig trees as a girl, stealing bread from market stalls because she was hungry and curious. She talks about the way the wind sounded when it blew through her hair, normal hair, and how she used to braid it with little shells. She talks about fear, how it crept in, how it bloomed, how it was placed on her like a shroud she didn't ask for. Historians still argue whether Medusa's transformation was metaphorical or literal. Was it divine punishment? A priestess cursed? A rape survivor reshaped by narrative? There are scrolls and theories and footnotes. None of them matter here, because tonight she's the source. She keeps going. She talks about Perseus, not the hero, not the murderer, not the statue posing golden boy. Just a scared kid with a sword too big and a mother to save. She says she forgave him, maybe even pitied him. Then she tells them the rest. The hiding, the healing, the word nest. You. Everyone listens like it's air. And when she's done, she steps out of the spiral and lets someone else step in. One by one, others enter and tell her story, but in their own voice, their own form. One sings it like a lullaby, another draws it in the dirt with a stip. A girl recites it backwards, giggling the whole time. Each version is different. Each one is true. Quirky tidbit.
Some fringe researchers have pointed to early Mediterranean mosaic fragments that seem to depict Medusa not as a monster, but as a storyteller surrounded by animals, suggesting alternative cults may have worshipped her not for her power to petrify, but for her power to preserve. Preserve memory. Preserve truth. Preserve community. And now, the final person steps out of the spiral. Silence. The spiral glows faintly under the moonlight, like the stories themselves are smoldering, satisfied. Dia, Medusa, steps forward one last time. This spiral began in fear, she says. Now it ends in voice. She kneels and smooths the spiral away, not with a flourish, just with the palm of her hand. The sand swirls soft and slow, and the bones and tokens vanish into the earth. Nothing is erased. It's just laid to rest. People don't cry, but some of them breathe like they've been holding it for years. You do too. Later, back at the cave, Medusa pulls out something from a tucked-away corner. It's the first stone she ever turned, small, jagged, still warm from her hand even now. I used to keep this to punish myself, she says. She places it in the fire, not to destroy it, just to let it stop being a secret. The flame dances around it. She leans back, and you realize something. This isn't the end of her myth. It's the beginning of her life, and yours too, because you've been changed, not with snakes or spells, but by witnessing someone uncoil their story until it wasn't a curse anymore. It was a garden. You stand to leave. You're not sure where you'll go, but you know how to walk. You know how to plant. You know how to listen. And wherever you end up, there will be stories, and you'll make space for them.
You pack slowly, not because there's much to carry, but because each item has its own little whisper. A stone you painted with a sleepy-eyed owl. A sliver of driftwood someone carved into a smile. A soft cloth that once held foraged thyme, now smelling faintly of sun and honey. Medusa, Dia, helps. She doesn't ask why you're going. She doesn't need to. This place has held you gently, but it never claimed you. You were always just passing through, just like the wind or that one goat that keeps climbing the roof of the kitchen hut. Where first, she asks. You shrug. Someplace with soup. She chuckles. A strong start. You look around the garden. The lemons are ripening. A child is trying to teach a snail how to fetch. Someone's weaving a hammock between two olive trees with a sense of great purpose. I'll miss this, you say. You won't, Dia replies. You'll carry it. She presses something into your palm. It's a shell, painted with a tiny spiral. You'll know where to come back to. You nod, unsure whether to smile or cry. So, you do both. Human versatility at its finest. Mainstream historical fact. In many ancient myths, heroes were often given a token before departing, an item to remind them of their purpose, or to return them home. Odysseus had his bow. Theseus had a ball of string. You have a spiral shell. As you start down the path, the village gathers, not to stop you, not even to say goodbye really, just to witness, to mark the movement, the way you once did for Medusa. Now they do for you. No big speeches, just nods, waves, quiet smiles. You walk. The cliffs fall away behind you, and the trees thin out, and eventually the sea becomes just a hush in the background. The world outside feels bigger than it did before, but also, somehow, less intimidating. You've seen worse. You've been through worse. And you're still here. You find your way to a port town. Sleep in a dusty inn where the bed sags like a thoughtful old man. Eat a fish stew that may or may not contain something that once stung someone. You listen to sailors argue over which sea monster is the least rude. It's like slipping into a different rhythm. But your feet remember the garden's path. You start telling people stories, just small ones at first, about a woman who once had very normal hair and very impressive basil. about a village that ran on salt, kindness, and an irrational number of spoons, about a spiral that held every version of a myth until it was too full to stay closed. People listen. Some roll their eyes. Others ask for more. A little girl insists on drawing the snake lady with rainbow hair and sunglasses. You hang it behind the bar in a seaside cafe. And just like that, her story continues. But not as hers anymore. As theirs. Yours. Ours. Ours. Quirky tidbit, in one obscure village near Lesbos, archaeologists found pottery fragments depicting a snake-haired woman cooking, not cursing. She wears an apron. There are no weapons, no warriors, just bread, olives, and laughter. Scholars argue whether it's parody, lost myth, or something in between. Historians still argue whether myth is meant to teach, warn, or distract. But those who've lived long enough, or just really well, know the truth. Myths are maps. And some maps aren't meant to be precise. They just help you not feel lost. You begin leaving small spiral shells in places where people need them. A temple's cracked step, a child's windowsill, a healer's table. No one asks where they come from. But some people start whispering stories of their own. About a stone garden that blooms at night. About a girl who speaks to snakes and never lies. About a place you can only find when you've forgotten the exact reason why you need it. The myth has scattered, like seeds. You're just helping it grow. And then one quiet night, when the sky is too big and the stars too many, you see her. Not in a flash of light, not in a dream. Just walking past a fruit stand in a busy square, wearing a green scarf and talking to a goat. She doesn't look at you, but one snake flicks its tongue in your direction. And you smile, because she's not a secret anymore, and neither are you. You turn to someone beside you and say, "Did I ever tell you about Medusa's herb bread?" They shake their head, and you begin.
You're older now. Not old, just the kind of older that feels like a well-worn hoodie. Soft at the edges, warm in the center, and a little stretched from stories you've grown into. Your days are quieter. You wake to birds complaining about the sun, spend time in a little kitchen with too many chipped mugs, and write things down. Not because you think someone will read them, but because it helps you remember that you were there, that she was real, that you are too. And sometimes, at night, you tell the stories again. The spiral is long gone, erased like tide lines, but it lives in your voice now. In the slow way you start, not with drama, but with a sip of tea and a raised brow. There once was a girl, you say, whose hair was perfectly ordinary, until one day it wasn't. They always lean in, those listeners. They want to hear about the snakes, the stone, the monsters, but you surprise them. You tell them about basil instead, about mornings in the garden, about a goat named Helen, about a woman who learned how to bake without making everything explode, about kindness with teeth, about myths that walk barefoot. Mainstream historical fact. In later Roman adaptations of Greek myth, Medusa began to appear less monstrous and more tragic, a shift from fearsome beast to wronged woman. Artists in the Renaissance continued this trend, painting her as beautiful and broken, often with sad eyes and soft expressions. The myth softened, even as the stone gaze remained. But your Medusa was never soft for their sake. She was soft like moss growing between ruins. She was strength that didn't need spectacle. And that version matters, because people are still afraid of powerful women, and of quiet ones, and of those who choose not to be either. You say her name, not the way it's been whispered for centuries, but the way she told you to, Dia. People always ask what it means. You say, it means she got to choose. They nod, even if they don't understand, because they feel it. There's something powerful about choosing your own name, your own shape, your own story. Quirky tidbit. Some folklorists believe the reason so many ancient myths involve snakes isn't fear, but reverence. In several pre-Greek matriarchal cultures, snakes were symbols of renewal, shedding, and wisdom, associated not with death, but with second chances. You sit with that. A woman with second chances growing from her scalp like wildflowers. Maybe the snakes were never the curse. Maybe they were the proof she survived. And maybe that's the point of the whole thing. Not that she turned people to stone, but that she didn't let being turned into a story destroy her. She rewrote it. Every time someone whispered her name in fear, she planted a new herb. Every time a sailor told a tale of her glare, she taught a child to read. Every time a sculptor chiseled her onto a shield, she baked a pie that made someone forget to be angry. You remember her laugh, like wind through broken statues. You remember how she said goodbye. You'll carry it, she told you. And you did. And you still do.
Historians still argue whether myth evolves from culture or shapes it, whether stories mirror our fears or forge them. But those who've been inside a myth, who've stood at the heart of a spiral while a snake yawned in the sun, know better. Stories don't answer questions. They give you better ones. And some nights, that's enough. Some nights, when it's very still, you can almost feel her beside you again, watching the stars, stirring soup, letting the past rest like a cat in a warm patch of light. And you smile. Because now you are the storyteller, and the next version begins with you. The story settles now, like soft dust on old books, like steam rising from a quiet cup of tea. You're lying in your bed, maybe with the window cracked just enough to let in a breeze, maybe with the hum of a fan spinning slow circles in the dark. The world outside has shrunk to a whisper, and inside, it's all spirals. Gentle, slow-turning spirals of thought and memory, and magic that doesn't need to sparkle to be real. You don't need to remember every detail, the herbs, the garden, the girl with the very normal hair. You just need to know the feeling. That somewhere, someone took a curse and turned it into comfort. That somewhere, a monster wasn't a monster after all, just a person with too many stories for one body. You breathe in, slow, the kind of breath that fills every corner of your chest, then lets go like a wave drawing back into the sea. Let it all drift now. The gods can wait. The myths can sleep. Even the snakes are curling up, warm and drowsy, not a care in the world. Let your thoughts unspool like that. Let them get a little fuzzy at the edges. There's nothing left to fix tonight. No quests, no shields, just rest, just softness, just a little spiral of peace that begins and ends with you. Sleep well, wanderer, and if you dream of stone gardens and sleepy snakes, tell them you're with a friend. you